Hey everybody, and I am back, and today we are going to talk about this little knife right here. It's a little gadget made by it's made by a company called Oceanus Brass, and that's a mouthful. Oceanus Brass, and it's called the Kraken knife. And from those two things, it'll tell you their shtick is all of their products are made of brass. And they have a nautical theme, so hence the Kraken kind of thing. It has these little kind of like almost tentacle looking hinges, you know, it kind of reaches out. Gonna give you just a quick run through of the design of the knife, the build quality. It was a Kickstarter project, so we're gonna talk a little bit about the process of that, and you know how it evolved throughout the process of making that, you know, go from a concept to an actual product. And then give you my pros and cons, and then my end conclusion thoughts. And we'll go from there. It is 100% brass. It's very nicely milled and engineered. As the only thing that's not brass on here is like the steel in the hardware for the pivots. So you got some Chicago screws, and there's the blade itself, and then that's about it. Just the screws and the blade. There's a little bow shackle on the there we go. There's a little bow shackle on the back that is also made out of brass. And it's an interesting design. If you're familiar with a knife called the Provoke, made by, I don't know what his name is, but there's a gentleman that made that knife, and then CRKT decided to mass produce it. And it's not a direct ripoff. It's not like they totally copied the Provoke, but it has some similar mechanisms in it where you have you got these two dual hinges. Most knives are going to have like a pivot, you know, going from like one side and the knife pivots open, whereas with this, actually, hold on a second, and the back. So with most knives, you're gonna have your handle and you're gonna have your pivot point right here, and as you open the blade, it's gonna, you know, pivot like that, and you're gonna have your pivot, right? One joint, one hinge, one point of movement. With this knife, you got two, right? You got two hinges and 2 points of pivot. And it makes for a very interesting mechanism. It's a little different. So it basically sheathes the blade here when it's closed, and then when it's open, there's magnets here and here. I don't know if you can see them. I'll give you guys some shots, some close-ups of it. But there's magnets here, and there's magnets here and here. They got 2 of them on each side, which is actually an evolving thing. It wasn't originally designed that way, so it's kind of cool that they upped the design to have that extra retention. So as your action on the blade, it's definitely, you can gravity drop this knife. It is possible. If there's like a scale of usability for a knife, I would say this one falls more in the ornamentative, like desk trophy type of thing. I mean, you could bring this with you. It's not the most practical in the pocket carry. Yeah, but it is a cool thing to have, you know, in your office. And let's see, what else for the design? It does have a bow shackle at the back that we were talking about, but you can take that off if you wanted to and just have it have a lanyard hole, or just have it with nothing. You know, it would make it much easier to carry in the pocket if you took that off. The hinges run on washers, so there's 2 little washers inside there, and that is a point of interest later in the Kickstarter section of this. But yeah, the action is nice. It has a very kind of addictive action to it. It's not assisted in any way, so the Provoke is a little bit more of an assisted action, and it has a lock in it. This has no lock, so it's more of like a magnetic slip joint. So as it opens and closes, the magnets are holding it in retention, and then your hand on top of it is like an extra bit of retention, so it's not gonna fold. But one thing that does worry me a little bit is there's no kind of choil or guard right here, so you could ride up onto the razor blade, which would suck a lot. But I mean, you're not gonna be batoning this through tree branches, so as long as you use it cautiously. If you're using it to open, you know, cut twine, open envelopes, that kind of stuff, I think you'd be okay. The brass is great. The brass is it's surprisingly heavy. When I got it out of the bag, I was surprised by the weight of the knife, and the engineering is really well done. All the edges are really nicely chamfered. Like, there's no sharp edges. There is one, I would say. So originally when this project started, this blade was exposed. There was no cover plate on here, and they actually did that as a stretch goal for the Kickstarter project. So if they hit a certain amount of money, they were going to implement that, and they did. but there's a very sharp little burr right here where the cover plate doesn't really line up to the original engineering. It doesn't line up perfectly, and there's an incredibly sharp burr right there. If you ran that down your hand, you would definitely probably open your hand up. It's pretty sharp. If you were going to keep this for carry, I would say definitely take a file and file that down to match the angle of the cover plate. But besides that, the rest of the knife, it's kind of an odd thing because they put so much attention to detail into everything else. But it's kind of like, you know, because it was an add-on, we're going to have to go back and re-engineer that entire section now, later, after we've already started production, to match this new plate. But I'm kind of surprised they didn't have the plate go up a little higher, because there is a bevel, like right on the top part of that plate. And you can see, I mean, if they didn't bevel that, then it would have run in there smooth. But then you'd have like a harder edge. So I don't know. It's kind of a... You can't win either way. But... besides that, everything's great. The screws are great. They use Chicago bolts in here, so they nest inside each other. That was also an upgrade. Originally, they had kind of more like a hex, just a standard looking bolt that looked a little chintzy, and the stuff they decided to put in there looks much nicer. Like those Chicago bolts do a great job. The blade, it's using a matte knife, a contractor's knife, so it's whatever you want to put in there. I mean, you can put a really high quality one in, or you can put a cheaper one in if you think you're going to be blowing through them really fast, or you really don't care. Everything else looks great. I don't think they made their own bow shackles. Those are probably just mass produced, and they do the job. You can see where it was cast. There's kind of like a line that doesn't match the engineering of the rest of the knife as much, because everything else is totally seamless and clean, but it's not bad. I mean, it's just, it is what it is. It's just a bow shackle on the end, and it does its job. It does what it needs to do. On mine, I actually stuck 2 O-rings in there. And what that does is it can't rattle anymore, because originally the hole in the back is smaller than the pin of the bow shackle, so this would rattle around and flop back and forth. But by putting those O-rings there, it'll stay wherever you want it to be. So if you're gonna mod this, that's one of the big ones. Yeah, but as far as build quality, I'd say solid. They did a good job. It's well put together. There is one caveat that I'm going to get to later on in the pros and cons, that it was kind of a deal breaker, but it's something that they suggested fixing, and there is an interesting fix for it, and it does the job. I'm not the happiest about it, but it gets the job done. Okay, on to the Kickstarter part. I wanted to cover a little bit. So this project came out, I don't know when it came out, but I signed up on it in... January, February, March. So around January, I got in, and I think it was around January, maybe a little bit earlier. I got in on this auction, and it was like, there's the early bird. You know how Kickstarter auctions have like different levels. So I got on the early bird one, and it was $35, and it was supposed to ship in March. So my birthday's in March, so I was like, okay, that's a cool self birthday present. Just something to have around the house to open boxes and stuff. And March came and went, and nothing, and then it kept going. It sold incredibly well. So I'll pop up some visuals on like I think they were shooting for like the minimum of $250 worth of orders, and at like 35, I think after the early bird it was 45. So that's, a certain amount of knives, but they ended up making like an insane amount of money. And actually I have that on my iPad. I can tell you exactly. Oh man. Dropping stuff. According to their Kickstarter, they originally were shooting to make $250, and instead they made $432,697. So that is a lot of orders. That's a lot. I get why they kind of hit some issues down the line, because that must have exceeded their expectations for how many they were going to sell by quite a bit. Like that's a lot. And it's cool because like as the thing was going, I think I have a graphic I'll show you guys, but you can see at like 10,000 they unlock like the stainless hardware instead of whatever they were going to have before, and then at 25, they said they would add. They said they're going to add copper washers to this, and I don't think they did. I think that there are aluminum washers in here, but they had all these stretch goals, and they hit all of them. One of them was you're supposed to get 2 bow shackles with this, and I only got 1. Which is kind of a bummer, but I don't really need a second one, so it's not the end of the world. But it's like, if you say you're going to do something, like, you got to do it. Like, I I don't know, like you should follow through on it, but it isn't the end of the world. What did suck is you can see in a lot of the comments when they first started shipping them out, people weren't getting, you get an extra set of hardware as one of the stretch goals, so all like extra Chicago bolts and that kind of stuff. But they did put the cover plate in there. That was one of the stretch goals of the Kickstarter project. So they hit most of them. There were some of them they kind of bobbled. But yeah, so it was supposed to ship in March. So, you know, you hit March, April, May, June, and then in June, at the beginning of the month, I got an email saying, hey, we got your stuff ready. It's ready to ship. You just need to log into our website, put it in a shopping cart, and use this code to check out. And I did all that stuff, and, you know, I'm kind of expecting, oh, all right, like, you know, this will come through in the mail at some point. Like they said, when you check out, they're like, we'll let you know when it ships. And a week goes by, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and nothing. And I'm sending them emails, and they're like, you know, we're just kind of, I can understand them being swamped, but I don't know. Why send out the, hey, your stuff's ready email if you're not going to send it? And they eventually did, and I got it. And that brings me to one of the other things. So when this shipped, it shipped in this like bubble wrap like bag. It's like a little bubble wrap envelope. And then it was inside of a kind of like canvas like bag inside. And that's it. That's it. There's no box, no nothing. Like that was it. And that rolls me into another point. So when I got into this on the Kickstarter, I got it for $35, and I didn't even look at any of the other stuff because I was just like, how much do I have to pay? And that's what I'm worrying about. But if you didn't make the early bird, it was $45, and then retail price is $100. So to me, if they ship this out as is in a bag in the mail at $100, like a lot of the complaints in the comments for that Kickstarter, if you go to that Kickstarter campaign, or that they got dinged up or they have scratches, it's like, dude, you got to put these in a box. Like $100 knife in a bag, in a bubble wrap bag, is kind of iffy. Which leads me to what I was talking about, the washers earlier. So this knife has washers at every joint, right? So there's 2 joints and 4 bolts, so there's washers on all of them. When I first took this out of the bag, I was super disappointed because it was super rattly. It sounded like a bunch of bolts in like a metal box just rattling around. And they actually have these updates on their Kickstarter campaign, and they were recommending to take the washers and kink them. And I've been collecting knives for over 30 years. I've never seen anybody recommend kinking washers. The washers in a knife, any knife, like you have this knife, you either have washers or bearings, and they're going to be made out of nylon or, you know, out of bronze, phosphor bronze or copper or whatever, aluminum, whatever you want to make your washers out of. And when the knife pivots, like so as these pieces move, if this is the knife and this is the washer, it's making a bearing, and you know, you have some kind of grease or you have actual bearings or whatever, you want it to be smooth. If you kink that washer, now you have like these 2 high points that are kind of like ice skating across the surface of whatever they're touching. In the history of knives, I don't think anybody has ever recommended having kinked washers, and it's filling the gap so that you don't have as much clearance. I don't know what happened there. I don't know if it was that they couldn't find Chicago bolts that fit the clearance right or something, but it's very odd. When I first saw it, I was just like, no way. And I tried it because I was like, well, I don't want it to rattle. And it is a good fix. Like once you do it, there's no rattle. Like it's clean. Like it's solid. It feels good, but it's an odd fix. And in the long run, it might be better to just put like thicker washers in there if you want to get one of these and keep it. I don't know about that whole bending washers thing. But yeah, besides that, yeah, so the Kickstarter thing, that was kind of cool. I'm glad that mine showed up okay. I don't know if everybody's did. If you look at the comments on the Kickstarter, there's a lot of unhappy people on there. There's people talking about like magnets popping out, stuff showing up all scratched up, you know, and that's not great. Especially, you know, if you're on the Kickstarter, that's one thing, but if you're paying $100 for this, that definitely would be a little iffy. And if you're paying $100 for a box cutter, that's, I'm not saying that no one should do that, but it's a very, I mean, like if you worked in an office and you engage with clients all day long and you have things on your desk that you like to use as icebreakers or something, or you like to communicate with people that way, you know, you have stuff on your desk, maybe like a signed baseball that has a story behind it or something, or, you know, this knife that you use to open your mail, it would have an interesting story. I could see that being worthwhile. But if you're just opening boxes and cutting twine, $100 for a box cutter is pretty gnarly, but, you know, to each their own. I would say the pros, with the exception of the bearings, is the build quality. The engineering is really well done. It has a great weight. The material is awesome. The brass they used is a very I don't know. It's just very nicely milled. It feels like a quality piece. Like if you were walking around some, antique store in New Hampshire or something, and you saw it on a shelf, and they were like, "Oh, it's 150 years old and was used by whalers in the Atlantic Ocean." It would make sense. You'd be like, "Wow, it's a very odd, kind of solution for a tool. Like it's a very interesting way to do something." But I think that part about it is really cool. It's very unique. It's different. If you like collecting oddity knives, maybe not so much for use on a day-to-day basis, but just like little things that you have around your house that kind of have an interest to you because of their engineering, it would be an interesting buy. Other pros, I mean, it's a contractor's knife. It's a matte knife. It's gonna cut. Like if you have something like there, they're sharp. If you had to travel with it, you could leave the blade at home, go to wherever you're going, and put a new blade into it, and then you'd be right up and moving again. You don't have to sharpen it, which is kind of cool. You get usage out of both sides of the blade because you can flip them around. They have these two little screws in here. So you take these two screws out, and they perfectly match up with the two little screws that are on the top of the blade, and you could flip it around backwards. And there's a bunch of different types of contractor's blades that you could put in there too. They have those like hook build ones and serrated ones and all sorts of stuff. Low blade maintenance would be pretty cool, and that you could bring it with you if you're traveling and just take the blade out. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. It's just, it's a fancy box cutter that has a very ornate design. Cons, I would say the bearing thing is very odd. That's a little weird to me. The way they ship it is a little, I don't know, you're running a gamble on, am I going to get my product dinged up, or is it going to be good? I think for, they could buy some 60-cent cardboard boxes with nothing on them, and just, that would, I think, put a lot of people's minds at ease, but, to each their own. Other cons, at the $35 buy price for the early bird thing, you could get a very solid entry level Leatherman. You could get like a Rat 1. You could get a pretty minimal Swiss Army knife. There's a lot of other options at $35 that have a lot more capability, but they're not. I don't think this knife was shooting to be a drop me out in the woods and I'll survive for 6 months with this tool kind of tool. I think it was meant to be a very fancy desk toy. At $45, you open up even more tools, and at $100, there's a lot of other options out there for an EDC tool if that's what you're looking for. But if you're looking for something nice to have on your desk, or maybe on like a table in your living room or a shelf in an office, it's pretty cool for that. I definitely wouldn't spend $100 on something like that, but then I don't work in a fancy office where I have to impress clients or something. I don't know. Like if you're the type of guy that buys like crazy desk ornamentation, then that might be something that's worth it for you. Other cons, yeah, I think it's about it. It comes apart very easily. You just have to take the little Torx bolts out. You kind of have to like teeter-totter balance it. I would highly recommend doing that O-ring modification to the bow shackle at the back. I think that makes it feel much higher quality, and it makes it easier to manage because it's not flopping around. And then if you do get it, I would do either the bent washer mod, or they have like a little guide on their site that shows you, here's how to do it, and here's what we recommend, and there's like a little animated GIF of how they did it. Besides that, I would say maybe even putting your own washers in, like finding a slightly thicker washer. But yeah, besides that, I think for the most part, it is what it is, right? Like it's the cons. Personal preference, I wish there was more jimping on here. I wish there was jimping across the top, across the bottom. I kind of wish that they would have hollowed out a little half circle maybe in here, like an oval right there. So when you open it, your finger would kind of have a place to rest on the bottom, or maybe in this hinge have like a little groove for ergonomics, because it's not, there's a lot of like little knobs and curves on here that your hand can kind of hold into, but it would be nice to have something to keep you from going forward onto the blade. Like having jimping across here, and brass looks so great when it has details in it. Like brass looks amazing when it has like little like hatches or knurling in it. Like this would be an amazing piece to add some detail to. If you're a modder, I could see that being a lot of fun. Yeah, besides that, I think if you're looking for a very kind of like Victorian kind of Captain Nemo looking odd knife, it's a great knife for that. And if you are looking for something a little more everyday carry, like that's more practical, that you can, crimp wire with and saw through trees with, it's probably not your best bet. But I mentioned that I got it on the Kickstarter, but I was not paid in any way to do this review, so this is 100% my opinions on it, and it is not biased in any way by anybody else's money or stuff like that. And that's it for this one. I would say I would give this knife like a solid like B. Like I would give it a for my taste, for like something I would carry around, I would give it a B. For someone that wants a fancy knife, it's probably an A for you. Like if you like collecting desk heirlooms, this is probably like an A+, because it's very well built. It's well put together and well thought out. But for me, I don't. It's a cool like curiosity. All right, and I think that's about it. Speaking of people paying me to do stuff, next week's review is going to be on a really interesting camping stove from China that these people, a company sent me, and it was right before I took a break from doing reviews, and they hit me in an email and said, hey, would you want to review our stove? And I said, hey, I really appreciate it. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to take a break for a while. And the lady replied with like, oh, that's fine. I'll send it to you anyway. And if you decide to ever do reviews again, and I was like, all right, if you want. So she sent it, and then about every 4 weeks for a year, she would email me and say, hey, have you changed your mind? Are you going to get back into this anytime soon? And I was always like, no, not really right now. And she was super polite about it, but I'm going to do their review. It's a very odd stove. It's very interesting. I think y'all will get a kick out of it, but yeah, come and check it out on the next review. Thanks for listening to me ramble and chatter about this knife. And if you're looking at it, I'll put a link to their site in the comments and you can check it out. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll catch you later. All right, bye.